Hi everyone, today we are joined by Seyed Mohammad Marandi, a professor at Tehran University and also a former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiation team. So welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So it seems that, well, at least before we started, you mentioned that the government in Iran does not think that this war is likely completely over and they're preparing for a possible round two. And it's, again, I think there's reasons to suspect that Israel is not completely done. However, in a second round, it's also very likely that Israel could use a proxy, be it the Jolani-led Syria, and some have even suggested the possible deeper involvement of Azerbaijan. And I wanted to start off with this talk about Azerbaijan because it is in the news now. It appears that it's stepping up a bit the hostility, not just towards Russia but also Azerbaijan. So I just wanted to, how serious do you see these accusations? I mean, is Iran worried about Azerbaijan at the moment?
The Republic of Azerbaijan is a problem because it has a very close relationship with the Israeli regime. Erdogan in Turkey and Aliyev in Azerbaijan together collaborate a lot with Israelis. Uh, we know that uh, oil goes from Baku through Turkey to um, the Israeli regime, and that there's extensive trade and business between these three countries. Uh, the Republic of Azerbaijan receives a lot of weapons from the Israeli regime. Their alliance is very close, and that is, of course, a threat to, from the Iranian perspective, a threat to the region. Uh, Azerbaijan is also very vulnerable because it is a small country. It is sandwiched between Iran and Russia, and it is a Aliyev is, of course, he's the lifelong leader of the country, and uh, he has uh, he has a history of being very unpredictable. Iran, at some point, Iran was actually assisting him during the very difficult days of the country. But later on, the Americans convinced him to shift away from Iran, and he did so. Now it is believed that he is actually supporting the Israeli regime in its aggression against Iran. There is it's a widely held belief among ordinary Iranians, especially those who live near the border, that drones fly from the Republic of Azerbaijan into Iran and attack targets, including targets close to the Republic in in Iran's province of eastern Azerbaijan and Ardabil and the northern provinces, and even Tehran. So things are becoming more tense. The Iranians, of course, want a peaceful Caucasus. We want our neighboring countries to live in peace because it's in everyone's interests. In the Persian Gulf region, even though all of these Arab family dictatorships are bound to the United States, but Iran doesn't want to uh, expand the war to these areas because it's in no one's interest. It's not in Iran's interest. It's not in anyone else's interest. But if the Iranians feel that Baku is insisting on continuing this sort of cooperation with the Israelis to the detriment of the Iranian people, then I think we'll probably see a shift. We'll see a shift in Tehran's position towards uh, Aliyev, and that could be dangerous. Dangerous for him. the popular mood in Iran is very negative towards him. And I think he underestimates how angry people in the northern provinces are, especially uh, provinces near Azerbaijan, the Republic of Azerbaijan. So we'll have to wait and see. But President Pezeshkian was there yesterday, and I think it's clear what he was trying to do. He was trying to, because there was the ECHO conference where heads of state from ECHO members were participating, and I'm sure that he told Aliyev Iran's concerns and tried to open the door to him to say that, look, you can have the opportunity for better relations, and you can also risk bringing about grave difficulty for yourself. So I think that's where we stand right now with Aliyev.
Yeah, well, for the Europeans and Americans, Azerbaijan always had that important position, because if you want to reach the East, and especially then Central Asia, and you want to avoid both the Russians and the Iranians, this energy corridor, if you can bring in Azerbaijan into your orbit, then not only do you access the Caspian, but you can also then extend into Central Asia, which is always in the thought in terms of this new great game as it was. But no, it's probably a wise idea to, well, given that it is sandwiched between Russia and Iran, it's probably a good idea to offer the carrot as well, in order not to trigger a security dilemma. But in terms of Syria, though, there's also chatter now about the possibility of well, Trump is removing sanctions on Syria. I have some mixed feelings. I think I think it's a good thing that the Syrian people, who usually suffer under sanctions, are relieved of this. On the other hand, this is seems to be a preparation stage to bring Jolani Syria more into the U.S. orbit and align policy interest. And could this mean Syrian involvement in a future attack on Iran?
Well, one thing that I think going back to the Republic of Azerbaijan, and that is that Mr. Aliyev, I think, misreads the current situation in the world. In the 90s, when he, at the orders of the United States, under pressure from the United States and the Europeans, when he distanced himself from Iran, that was at a time when the United States was the global superpower. That's when the United States was the hyperpower. And Europe, of course, as the close ally of the United States, was empowered as a part of that empire. But the world has changed, and the protective umbrella of the United States for Aliyev or the Europeans is not very impressive. And so, unless he rethinks his foreign policy and looks carefully at the map and what's happening in the world around him, then there could be significant trouble ahead for his country, especially, as I said, it's a small country, very dependent on oil and gas, and it does not have the ability to resist a power like Iran. And its population, a large part of the population is very sympathetic towards Iran. Uh, most Azeris are Iranian, and he is of course, he suppresses religion in his country, and that makes him very unpopular. Many religious leaders, almost all the key religious leaders in the country, are in jail or are under some form of house arrest, and his and of course his alliance with the Israeli regime, as this Holocaust is being carried out in Gaza, and as the slaughter is being carried out in Lebanon or the West Bank, the killings in Lebanon and what the West Bank continue, that creates anger among the general public, as it does across the region and beyond when people see their governments cooperating with with Netanyahu and his regime. So that is an issue that I think in the days, weeks, and months ahead will have to be addressed in Baku in one form or another. But Syria, I think it's a different case, Glenn. I think Syria is, of course, the sanctions should have been removed a long time ago. These sanctions are barbaric sanctions against any people anywhere in the world. Can only be imposed by regimes that have no sense of humanity, whether it's Cuba or Afghanistan or Yemen or Syria or anywhere else. Sanctions are for targeting ordinary people. There's that is the objective. To say otherwise is just to be deceptive. When they say they're targeting the government or what they like to call regimes, that's just to justify what they're doing. But the objective is to harm ordinary people. It's a war. It's a form of, it's just like bombing people, but it's a silent uh, form of murder. So that obviously is something good. Nothing, the Americans shouldn't be thanked for it. They haven't, it's like the Israelis carrying out a ceasefire in Gaza, let's say. No one should thank the regime for it if they actually do have a ceasefire. But I think Syria is falling apart. I mean, Jolani or Shara or whatever they'd like to call him, um, he is not going to be able to do anything positive for Syria, and I don't think that's his intention. The different groups that are aligned to him or deeply divided. There are deep differences between them. There are many thousands of foreign fighters as well, and many of these Salafists and Wahhabis, they have their own agenda, and Syria is a destroyed country. The Israeli regime, after the fall of President Assad, they went and destroyed the country's infrastructures. They've occupied key territories, and Shara is desperate. He's more interested in killing his own people or attacking the borders of Lebanon than he is for to put pressure on the Israeli regime militarily and push them out of his territory. And the Israeli regime is overstretched uh, as it is. And if there's a moment in which he could put pressure on the regime, it is now, because they mobilize everywhere and they're waging war everywhere. But he has no intention to do so. And this is something that the Iranians were predicting from day one in 2011, when Qatar and Turkey and others were supporting this dirty war on behalf of the Americans and the Israelis. The Iranians were saying from the beginning that the objective is to destroy Syria, to bring a regime to power that is obedient to the United States. And that's basically what's now happened. And many of those who supported this dirty war, I think, are waking up to the reality, except for a segment of people who've been so deeply brainwashed by Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Salafists and Wahhabis. It's this, the sectarian, racist sort of people that will never change their mindset. Except for them, everyone else has recognized by now what is really going on in Syria. But I don't think that's going to do the United States any good, because the more Shara or Jolani tilts to Israel, the stronger the resistance becomes. Because what the United States and the Israelis and their regional allies, like Erdogan, Qatar, and others, succeeded in doing in the past was use sectarianism to divide the region. And that's how they weakened the resistance. But now, I think after what we saw in Lebanon, what we saw in Yemen, and the war against Iran, people across the region recognize the role that the resistance and the axis of resistance plays in supporting the people of Gaza. And if Shara or anyone else makes, but Shara in particular, makes more moves towards normalization, then more people are going to uh, join the resistance. Those who've been opposed to the resistance because they believe the sectarian and the other uh, narratives used against the resistance, they're going to shift. So, I've always said that the closer any countries grow to Israel, the less popular they become, and the less legitimate they become in the eyes of their own people. The only country that can get away with this sort of thing is a country like the Emirates, because the Emirates is a police state. They are so they are so carefully monitoring everything that happens that no one in the country is going to say anything. Most people in the Emirates are foreigners. They are indentured servants, sort of like any slave sort of people. Uh, Only a bit over 1 million people in that country actually have Emirati passports. The rest are foreigners. So the control that the state has is immense. But other countries, they are always facing grave difficulty. The situation in Jordan is not good. The situation in Syria, not good. Even in Saudi Arabia, people uh, expect the Saudi government to support the Palestinian people. But if the Saudi government is seen to be tilting away from the Palestinian people, it undermines the authority of the state. So everything right now, under these circumstances where everyone is angry and everyone is outraged and day and night they're watching the scenes, tilting towards the Israeli regime, in a sense, strengthens the axis of resistance.
Well, in terms of the, I guess, changing map or alliance systems in the Middle East, how does the, the war alter the relationship between Russia and Iran? Because the Russians I spoke with, they usually made the point that Iran and Russia has these historical differences, but after the common interests and cooperations in Syria, then they saw an opportunity that this limited partnership could be advanced, build on it to create a much wider strategic partnership, especially important now in the era of the SCO, BRICS, and this Eurasian integration project where Iran will be a key partner of Russia. And I guess in this war, there's been some concerns from Moscow as well. They saw the dishonest negotiations, something they have discovered themselves many times. They saw the use of drones, which have been smuggled into their country, also happened in Iran. And Iran, they attacked the nuclear reactors. In Russia, they attacked the nuclear deterrent. So there's a lot. They see a lot of similarities. But I also hear that to what extent why has there not been more integration? And they often point towards Iran, saying that there's still a lot of distrust towards the Russians in Iran. I guess for good reasons. You can go through the 19th century, or there's been plenty of wars. So again, this reason for the distrust. But how do you see this partnership functioning in the wider rearrangement of the region?
Well, I've always been a supporter of Iran-Russian relations. I think I'm known for that in Iran long before it became more popular. So, uh, I want to say that first, so that your viewers recognize where I'm coming from. The Iranians and the Russians, of course, I don't want to go into history, but Syria, since Syria, the two countries began to work more closely because both of them were concerned about the Takfiri extremists. These are tools that the United States and NATO have been using for decades, whether in Afghanistan or Pakistan, whether in Libya or in Syria, and now more recently in Iran. We saw that these uh, Zionist collaborators inside Iran, many of them were the Salafi, Wahhabi, Takfiri, ISIS, Al Qaeda, that sort of people. They're not one single group, but a lot of them come from that sort of background, whether they're so-called refugees or the illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants, whatever term you'd like to use, or whether they were Iranian. A lot of them had that sort of background. So, and they, of course, as in Syria, they collaborate with the Israeli regime very easily. Now, in Syria, the Iranians, when East Aleppo was liberated from these extremist groups, the Iranians wanted to finish the job in Idlib, but the Russians wanted to do a deal with Erdogan. And Iran was against that, but ultimately um, the Russians got their way, and that was, I think, a decisive factor in what in bringing about the situation today in Syria. Also, in the Caucasus, the Iranians had different policies than Russia, and today I think the Russians are beginning to see that Iran was probably they were not wrong. They were probably and their understanding of the changes that were taking place in the Caucasus because of the United States and the Europeans. Um, I think the Russians are beginning to show some concern. But I think while Iran-Russian relations have improved a lot, and they have a very strong partnership in different fields. I think the key issue right now is that Russia has 2 million Russian speakers in Israel, in Palestine. And that is a very complicated issue for the Russians. So I think, just to put it very carefully, I think right now what um, the, if there's a stumbling block in expanding the relationship between Iran and Russia in all areas, is the concern that Russia has about those 2 million people who are in Palestine and the sort of influence that they have in Russia in one form or another. So I think that it's, if anything, it's not the Iranian side. Iran, of course, you're right. Iranians do have a history with Russia. And also during the past few years, as I said, in Syria and in the Caucasus, the Iranians have not been happy with some of the policies that Russia pursued. And I think that the Iranians feel vindicated that Russia, that their views were probably correct, and the role of and how NATO is going to be unrelenting in both Syria and the Caucasus. But I think that probably the only thing that holds, and again, the relationship is very good, but I think the only thing is the issue that exists between Iran and Russia today that could impede further cooperation in some areas would be the fact that Russia has 2 million citizens of its own in Palestine. Now, that doesn't mean that the again, I have to stress this multiple times, the relationship is still very good. And the relationship today cannot be compared to the relationship 3.5 years ago. But I think you have to look at the population in Palestine and the number of Russian speakers that are there to better understand where some of the problems, let's say the problems that do exist, where they stem from.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. President Putin actually mentioned, he was asked about I guess, where the soft spot for Israel came in, and he did mention, well, we do have to take into account the reality of these, Russian speakers. So that's an interesting point. Well, I also want to ask, so maybe it's very specific, but on in terms of the possibility of this war restarting, we see that Trump has been really specific on one word over and over again. He keeps saying we obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, and he even went after CNN saying we have to use the right word, obliterated. There's nothing left. And people have interpreted this in many ways. Some see it as merely being his usual, narcissistic, self-congratulatory, I did it, not the greatest strike in history. But others have interpreted it as putting an end to the war, because by saying that it's obliterated, there's no Iranian nuclear program, then there's no more reason to fight, and Israel, needs to pull back. And so again, there's different interpretations. I'm still on the fence, to be honest. I guess this is his deliberate tactic as well, to be very ambiguous. And again, I think it's a very disruptive and dangerous policy not policy, but approach. But to be this ambiguous. But how do you interpret this whole, we obliterated the Iranian nuclear program?
I don't think that these two interpretations are mutually exclusive. And I think that it's probably a combination of both. Although I have no way to assess whether either the Americans and the Israelis and the Europeans, they're carrying out lots of cyber attacks in Iran. And so the Iranians, every time when these attacks become very heavy, they slow down the internet and to protect the country until they're able to deal with the attack, and then the speed goes back to normal. So over the past 3-4 days, it's been like that a lot. Oh, so should I continue?
Yes, you were saying that it's probably a combination of the both, and then it froze and went away.
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of both, and that Trump he does not want to any conflict with Iran, because he knows it's not going to end well for the United States or for the world or for anyone. Um, but also it is that narcissism there too. So I think it's probably a combination of both. In fact, I think I'm sure you recall earlier Trump spoke about Netanyahu and his problems with the judiciary, and he was saying that they should leave him alone, and he's a great leader, and I think, and this is just my personal interpretation, it may be wrong, uh, but I think that the reason why Trump wants to support Netanyahu and to put pressure on the opposition to Netanyahu is possibly because he wants Netanyahu to feel more secure, so that Netanyahu will not continue expanding war. Again, I may be completely wrong, but I think because I don't see why uh, someone like Trump would have to invest so much in this genocidal monster, because it destroys the U.S. image even further across the world. Uh, Although there's not left for the image of the United States, but I think maybe I'm not saying that Trump is any better than Netanyahu, but the point is for him to invest in this individual so much to the detriment of the Netanyahu's opposition inside the Israeli regime. I think it may have to do with the fact that Netanyahu, one of the reasons why Netanyahu constantly engages in war and creates crises is because he wants to stay in power, because he wants to stay out of jail, and he needs these crises. So maybe I was thinking that Trump is saying leave Netanyahu alone to the Israeli political establishment, so that maybe Netanyahu would calm down and put the United States under less pressure, Trump under less pressure to uh, and uh, and ease tensions in the region. But again, this is just personal speculation. I have no evidence for this whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, it could be the case, but do you see, sorry, just as a last question, do you see any um, signs that the war could return anytime soon, or is it so far, um, well, so far so good, I guess?
The feeling in Tehran is that the Israeli regime will probably attack again, because the first round didn't go well for the regime. In fact, it strengthened Iran, even though it was on day one, Iran was badly hurt. Many senior commanders were murdered and martyred. And of course, you had all these terrorists and these Takfiri terrorists inside Iran carrying out sabotage. So day one was very bad for Iran. Uh, but then after, I think, 14 hours, when the missiles and drones began to hit Israel, we saw gradually the tide turn after a couple of days. Uh, that was becoming increasingly clear. And by the end of the war, on day 9, 10, 11, it was clear that Netanyahu was in trouble. So if you look at it from that perspective, one would say that the Israeli regime probably should not attack because Iran is obviously stronger, and Iran right now is preparing itself for a very, very severe attack on the Israeli regime if they initiate something. But then again, we have to go back to Netanyahu and the fact that Netanyahu needs a crisis. He needs to have the region in turmoil. And so it is quite possible that he and his allies will, and quite probable in the eyes of many here, that they will strike again. And, one of the things that happened in this 12-day war is that uh, one major myth was busted. And that was the myth that we've seen in the West for well over a decade. And that is that they've always been saying that Iran is a house of cards. It can easily collapse. All we have to do is give it a push. That's what we've been hearing in American think tanks for, for a very long time now. And this war, they murdered so many senior Revolutionary Guards officers and generals that based on that assessment, the country should have collapsed. But it didn't. And the country, the population rallied behind not just the state and the leader, but the guards themselves. And I think that destroyed the myth that Iran is somehow inherently weak. In fact, I think it shows the opposite. It shows how strong Iran is, that you can kill so many of its leaders, but nothing will happen, and people will come to the streets in support. So I would argue vigorously that Iran has emerged stronger as a result of this war and much more popular across the world as well. And so I don't think it's smart for the regime to attack. But I think the expectation in Iran is that Netanyahu, every day is violating the ceasefire in Lebanon, despite the fact that Western countries are guarantors, and he tore up the ceasefire agreement with Gaza alongside Trump. So the expectation in Iran is that he will carry out an attack, but this time around, the Iranians are far more prepared. And the plan is to strike the Israeli regime much harder.
Well, Professor Marandi, as always, thank you for letting me pick your brain, and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Glenn. You stay safe too.